Welcome to Chase Thoughts. My name's Chase. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit different, and I have been a big fan of League of Legends for a long time. It's been a game that I've played a lot of. I've played since the very beginning of Season 2. And I've kind of consistently played the game overall this time. And it's probably the most consistent game I've ever played. I've been playing it for there in Season 8 now, so I've been playing it for almost 7 years. I'm getting close to 7 years since I started in October. So of that first year, so we're getting close to my 7th year. It was in the preseason before Season 2 is when I started. But one thing that I thought would be really fun and something to do a little bit different would actually be to give an analysis of the quarterfinal match between G2 Esports and Misfits Gaming. Now, this game happened earlier today, which was Saturday, August 25th. This game happened earlier today, since I am in the US. It happened in the morning. EU, it happened in the afternoon. But this game was a very hype game. There was Misfits, who at their peak just looked so strong. They looked so strong, and they looked like they were on a different level than everyone else. And they kind of fell off that peak, and as you can see, as I'll throw up right now, the records for both these teams moving across the entire split, you can see how Misfits, who's on the bottom, kind of had their win streak, and then they lost a game to Fnatic, and it just kind of went downhill from there, only picking up 2 more wins for the rest of the split. On G2's side, G2 also picked up a very good split, winning game after game after game, and then lost the game to Misfits, and then kind of fell apart a little bit for the rest of the season. They didn't fall apart as hard as Misfits, losing 6 of their rest games, whereas Misfits lost 7 of their next games, only won 2, and they picked up more wins. They did lose key games to like Misfits, Fnatic, Schalke. They lost key games to top of the table team, beating out most of the teams lower than them and losing to teams higher than them. Which ended up landing them in the tiebreaker at the end of the day, where they had to battle it out for the overall second place spot that they ended up losing out on to Vitality. With Misfits kind of fall from grace, I guess you could say, for lack of a better words, with their kind of hype and then kind of falling down, and G2's kind of rocky performance, but they've still kind of maintained an average. I mean, they lost 6 games, they won 6 games, they went 6-6 at the end of the split. After winning 6 games in a row, they went 6-6 then at the end. So they still ran an even week by week record compared to the 2-7 performance from Misfits after they had won 9 games in a row. So going into this match, I considered G2 a very big favorite going into this game, and I'll throw up right now my prediction going into this series. Before the match was even played, I predicted G2 Esports to 3-0 Misfits Gaming. Now, I thought that Misfits, if they would return to their form, they'd kind of get themselves together and do what they needed to do, which I'll talk about in a second. Misfits could 3-0 G2 Esports. I thought it could go 3-0 either way. I thought G2 had the advantage, but I didn't think this series was going to go more than 3 games, just because of both the ways they play. Misfits plays a style where they like to slug it out, and they like to take early game advantages and translate that into a game victory. And if they can't find those early game advantages, they usually lose out in the game. They just don't come back up, they just fall straight down. So in that case, if they couldn't find those early game advantages and G2 is winning, they wouldn't be able to pick themselves back up and repace themselves, and they would lose 3 games in a row. On the other hand, if they could pick up those early game advantages, they'd kind of start the ball rolling and snowball out and pick up 3 back-to-back wins against G2 Esports. I didn't think it was going to be a 3-1, 3-2, anything like that series. I just thought it was going to be a flat 3-0. And it did. Spoiler alert, but I mean, you should watch the games before listening to an analysis of the entire series. But spoiler, the game did end in a 3-0 in the favor of Misfits. Now, going into this game, why did I think it was going to be a 3-0? Now, I really saw this as a clash of styles. I'll throw up the graphic right now where you can see that G2 plays a lot more of a mid-focused game. They take Yankos and they try and funnel as much resources as possible into perks. And then from those resources, they rely on perks to carry their game. While on the opposite side, Misfits take Senkox and Maxlore and they focus on the bot lane side, getting Hansama ahead, as well as Mickey X, who's a very aggressive support lane pick, and to find those advantages and translate those bot side advantages into an overall win. Looking at that, what did I see as the win conditions for both these teams, or what was I looking for at the start of this series? Well, I was looking for early game pressure out of Maxlore. Maxlore has kind of been, he looked really good at the beginning of the year, and then he kind of fell. He almost fell into obscurity the last 9 games of the split, the entire second half of the split. He kind of fell into obscurity. So I was really looking for him to put down a lot of early game pressure and help pick up those advantages for Hansama and Senkox in order to snowball that ahead. And I was also looking at Hansama on the side of Misfits to pick up some hard carries. I wanted him to play things like the Kai'Sa, the Draven that he's known for, things like that. Stuff that can hit down and translate an early game advantage into just a snowballing victory and just get stronger and stronger and stronger as the game progresses, to make it very hard for G2 Esports to do anything. On the side of G2, I really want Yankos to keep up the pressure with Maxlore. That's what I wanted him to do. I want him to keep up the pressure with Maxlore so that they can keep that side by side. So if Maxlore ganks bot lane, Yankos to be there. Or if Yankos can't be there, he should be top side or mid side, helping Wonder or Perks. And Perks himself needs to be on a playmaker. I was looking at him, I wanted him to pick 3 playmakers in a row in those games, all champions that can get something, hit something hard. Now, looking at the draft for all 3 games side by side, what did we end up seeing out of the series? Well, we saw in our first game, we saw Perks on that playmaker. Exactly what I wanted him to do. He picked up LeBlanc, he got it. We saw Varus ban, they were targeting Hansama, they didn't want him to get that Varus that he's been able to carry very well with across the split, that he's shown very consistent play on. And they continued that in all 3 of their games, whereas instead of banning the Varus, where they had lost to the Kalista, oh man, I almost called Kalista Kai'Sa, where they had lost to the Kalista in the very first game, they decided to switch out that ban for Kalista, and they're like, we're on the red side these next 2 games. Instead, we're just going to red side, blue side, I'm sorry. They were on the blue side in those 2 games, and Misfits was on the red side in those 2 games. They're on the blue side those 2 games. They're going to first pick Varus in game 3, and they're in a second rotation Varus in game 2, denying that away from Hansama. But there wasn't really that kind of focus from Hansama. I was actually really worried going into the second game about Hansama picking up Ezreal. I don't think Ezreal's very good right now. Not that he's always good. Ezreal's always a good pick. There's just a lot of really big, beefy tanks in the meta, like the Sejuani and the Sion that we see from, and even the Gragas to some extent that we saw from G2 using in this game. And it's very hard for Ezreal to keep his damage output up and keep pacing with those heavy tanks, where it can almost feel like Ezreal's throwing wet noodles at the tanks and he's not putting out the damage needed to keep those team fights and keep that rolling. Whereas the Kalista, great for shredding. Draven shreds everyone. Those are 2 great pickups, great hard ones. I was really worried about the Ezreal, and Hansama blew my expectations out of the water. He played very well with his Ezreal. He showed how you can carry with that pick, how picks like the Sion, the Sejuani, 2 tanks in that roster of G2 in that game 2, none of them mattered. Hansama can just hit him through. Now, game 2 was a game that was very close. G2 did almost come away with that win, but Misfits regained control, which did it. It was a great come from behind play on the side of Misfits for them able to do that. And what I really saw across the 3 games, I thought was a very lack of adaptation from G2. G2 came in and they're like, we're going to play super aggressive. But they didn't play super aggressive, but that's how they drafted in game 1. They're like, we're going to draft the Gragas. We're going to draft the Braum. We're going to draft the LeBlanc. Then we're going to pick up Gangplank, and then we're going to pick Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw was a question mark. I threw missing pings all over Kog'Maw. I was confused why they had this early game high damage output team. I mean, Gangplank is a scaling champion too, but against the likes of Cho'Gath, Skarner, and Alistar, they're going to have a big beefy front line that Kalista can stand behind, and TF can just look for picks. So they had that big beefy front line, and I'm like, okay, so you're going to have that Kog'Maw. The Kog'Maw is going to put out a lot of damage, but if Kalista can kill your entire team before you have the ability to get that consistent damage, because no one on this team can really block for Kog'Maw besides the Braum. But once the Braum's dead, I mean, Gragas really isn't going to be blocking for your Kog'Maw, so I was really confused about that Kog'Maw pick. I know it's a strong pick, and it has the ability to hyper carry, but I would have liked to see a little bit safer of a mage going into that. Mage, not mage. A little bit safer of a AD carry going into that. Something that can move around the map, kind of kite a little bit better, and not going to get caught out by that huge amount of CC that Misfits was bringing into that game. I really liked Perks picking up the LeBlanc. He didn't really do anything with the LeBlanc that game. Compared to his 2 Rise games, where he kind of was putting in a lot more pressure in his 2 Rise games. But overall, I also had iffy things on that pick. One thing that I really liked from this game that I'm going to say about G2's ability to adapt the strategy is they waited 2 games. They waited till game 3 to ban the Cho'Gath. Alfari showed up huge in this series. He played so well against Wonder. It was crazy how good he was playing in this game. He solo killed Wonder twice in his 2 games. In the first game, he solo killed his Gangplank. Then he solo killed the Gangplank again. Maybe going into game 2, they're like, all right, we're not going to pick Gangplank. Cho'Gath is a counter. Clearly, that's Alfari's counter into Gangplank with how good he played against Wonder. We don't have to worry about that pick because we're not going to pick Gangplank. But he picks it blind. He picks it blind. They don't know the top laner at that point, so he picks a blind Cho'Gath. So it just shows how confident Alfari was in that play going into the second game. And G2 chose not to ban that, instead banning the Trundle, which I also thought was a little weird, since maybe they thought, like, oh, he's not going to pick Skarner again this time. We'll ban the Trundle. When that Trundle ban could have easily been a Cho'Gath ban, I think that would have put them in a better position, because it would have forced Alfari into a different champion. Another thing that I thought was weird is out of the 3 games, Gnar was only banned once, and Wonder just avoided it all 3 games instead opting for Gangplank and Sion, which was kind of confusing, especially because after the Sion lost the first game, after they lost the game 2, where Cho'Gath was again putting down a ton of pressure on top of the Sion. In game 3, they're like, we're going to pick the Sion again, but this time we're going to ban Cho'Gath. So this time he picks the Mundo, and he still is losing lane to the Mundo. Mundo was outpacing him in lane. He was putting down more damage than him. He pushed him out of lane a couple times. He almost killed him. He definitely almost killed him once. So at that point, I'm like, in game 3, why wouldn't you just ban the Cho'Gath and pick the Gnar? Something that Wonder has been successful on. Is just kind of confused why they just decided to all around avoid the Gnar. I get the Nocturne pick. They were going for some picks with Nocturne, get that early game aggression, get more early game pressure out of Jankos that they were totally missing in the other games, because Jankos was missing like this entire series overall. So the Nocturne pick, I do like that adaptation in game 3, but he still really didn't utilize it, I don't feel, as much as he could have. Now, after the series is done, what do and I guess they banned Trundle in the 3rd game too. I didn't even notice they banned Trundle. I did like in game 3 that they did 4 jungle bans leading into the Poppy and the Nocturne. It almost seemed like G2 banned themselves out, because I get that they're on blue side, so they could have, so they were afraid, they didn't want, and it showed from their Trundle ban in game 2, they didn't want Misfits to get the Trundle. They didn't want it. They didn't want Maxlore to get the Trundle. They didn't think that Maxlore getting Trundle was a good idea. They banned out the Trundle. Misfits actually banned out the Skarner, even though they used it in the first game. They didn't want that to be a playmaker for Jankos. And then the Sejuani, he played it in game 2. They banned that out. They didn't want him on it again. And then the Gragas ban. Kind of confusing about the Gragas ban. I guess they wanted to play the Nocturne and then force Maxlore to play something that isn't Nocturne, because they didn't want to pick Gragas and give him into the Nocturne. And Jankos didn't really have a good performance in game 1 on the Gragas. So I guess that's why they didn't want to just go into Gragas again, especially when they had 2 big, bulky front lines like Sion and Alistar. But between game 2 and 3 for G2, I felt like, and I always hate this, you hear the casters talk about it all the time, and you hear coaches and you hear teams talk about it. When they lose a game with the team comp, they say, oh, well, the team comp wasn't what was wrong, it was our execution of the team comp. So in the next game, we're going to draft the same team comp and we're going to play it again and make better plays. And I've seen it work out a couple times, but across all the regions, since I watch LPL, LCK, EULCS, and NALCS, I've seen it work out a couple times, but the majority of times it doesn't work because the team drafted a comp of answers to you once. You pick the exact same team, and you ban out a couple of those answers. And now that you've banned out a couple of those answers, you're like, oh, well, we got rid of your Kalista, which was what we had a problem with in Game 1. And we got rid of your Cho'Gath, which is what we had a problem with in Game 1 and 2. So now what are your answers to Sion, Alistar? And their answer to that was Mundo, Poppy, and the Malzahar, which he looked great on both games. And that, because they basically drafted the exact same team comp for those 2 games. They had Varus both games, Sion both games, and Ryze both games. They didn't really adapt between those 2 games. They said, let's pick the same team, basically the same team, pretty close to the same team. We'll run it back again, and this time we're going to play better. That doesn't always work. I don't think that's a good idea to do. I think that you should adapt, try something new, that you should be like, okay, so this isn't going to work. Let's ban out something strength, and let's hit them with something different. Because overall, out of these 3 games, in a best of 5 series, I was kind of wondering what G2 was going to show any team moving forward. If they would have won, like they didn't, like, did they hide something here? Like, were they not willing to give up something because they thought they could come back with their own play? But it just didn't look like they adapted well in the drafting phase. And Misfits on their side, they took full advantage of that lack of adaptation. They put Hansama on 3 different AD carries that he carried with really hard. They put Maxlore on 3 high pressure jungles. His pressure with Poppy, able to catch people out with the dash stun and being able to just eliminate any dashes in general. And then the Skarner being able to pick people off with his ultimate and his ability to engage with his Gragas. So they put down those 3 plays. They had the Braum the 2 games, which Mickey X looked okay on. He had a couple weird ultimates, but other than that, he looked pretty good on that. So they picked these good champions moving into it, and they picked a comfortable style, I feel, where they funneled those resources into the bot side of the map. And it's going to move straight into what I liked about Misfits. And the big thing that I liked about them was, and who I really think showed up in this game, was Alphari, Maxlore, and Hansama. And I feel like I've already talked about them a lot, but Hansama showed up on all those 80 carries. His performance on those 80 carries kind of speaks for himself. He showed up great in all those games. He showed up great on Ezreal. He showed up great on Draven, and he showed up great on his Kalista. He showed up great on all of those. His Kalista play in the first game warranted a ban in the next 2 games. His Draven, he's known for his Draven. So him pulling out that pocket pick in the 3rd game just showed why he's known for that. Alphari put down such lane dominance and such lane control against Wunder. Wunder seen as one of the best top laners in all of EU, and watching those games against Alphari, you would think it's the other way around, because Alphari played so cleanly in that lane. He put down all the pressure he needed to, and he just looked so good and so lane dominant. And Maxlore did exactly what he needed to do. He put down constant pressure. Him and Sunkux put down that pressure in the bot lane. They got such a high advantage on the bot lane of the map that the bot lane of the map was lost to G2. They had nearly full objective control on that bot lane of the map, that bot side of the map. They got almost every dragon in every game. They had almost every Baron. Then they translated those dragons into Baron, and they translated that bot lane advantage in the top side of the map, securing those Barons in those games, which they used in most cases to close out the game. So they were able to move those advantages into a full game domination. They just looked great overall in this game. And on the other side of G2, I'm going to go over what I feel was lacking out of G2's performance. I feel like I talked about it all. Wunder, total lane flop. He didn't seem like he showed up to play in those games. He just wasn't putting out the performances he needed to put on against Alphari, and he just didn't look like the Wunder that we're used to. It almost looked like there was a different person playing on with the name Wunder. Jankos put down no pressure in any of those games. In some of those games when I was watching these games, some of those games, it kind of felt like Jankos wasn't even there. He wasn't able to keep up with Maxlore's pacing. when Maxlor ganked Hansam in the bot lane, he didn't even translate that into pressure on the top side of the map or on the mid lane of the map. He didn't keep up pressure on the map. He didn't try and drift those advantages. Like, okay, they're going to take... He did sometimes when they took bot lane. They took Rift Scuddler, but they didn't... And you can see the bottom, I put no bot side control or answer. They had no answer to bot side. When they did get Rift Scuddler or Rift Herald, they would put down the Rift Herald, and in the one game, Poppy ulted everyone away, and they just killed it right away. Made no use at all out of it. In game 3, they were just able to match everything that Jankos wanted to do, and Jankos really didn't want to do much, it seemed. And Perks, I'm gonna put as a downside for him was his 2 games on Ryze. I wanted him on a playmaker. Ryze is, especially the way he was playing Ryze in those games, he played Ryze like, I'm a champion that wants to sit in my own lane. My 4 teammates are gonna group, and I'm gonna push the side lane. I'm gonna get things in the top side lane. The only problem with that is Misfits' style was such a slugging style where they wanted to get in their face and they wanted to kill G2 as much as possible. Even in game 2, where G2 was macroing in the early game, they were moving around the map, they were outpacing Misfits in the map, taking more objectives. They were doing that better than Misfits in some accounts, but Misfits was like so bloodthirsty in these games. They were showing up so much, going after those kills, and translating those kills into advantages. They would win a fight, take a tower, things like that. They would win fights. Every fight they were in, they would just win these fights, win fight after fight after fight, outpacing G2. G2 is like, we can move around the map better than you, and they showed a better macro understanding, especially in the second game. But Misfits is like, you can macro all we want, you can take all the towers that you want, but if your whole team's dead, we're still going to kill your next. And G2 really had no answer to that, especially losing out every dragon, which translated into full game stats that helped boost those engagements and that fighting style with Cloud Drakes. I think there was Cloud Jakes, Ocean Jakes, which helped extend their fights and their pressure on the map. And I don't know if they got an Inferno. I know G2 got an Inferno at one point, but I don't remember if they got an Inferno or not. And the game didn't last long enough. I don't think anyone ever got an Elder. I don't think the game ever lasted long enough for even anyone to want to go to Elder. So, Misfits played a great game in this series. They did everything that I wanted them to do to win, that I thought that was their win conditions. They did everything out of that and more. Alfari showed up big on the top side. G2 on the other side of the coin, on the flip side, they kind of fell flat. Across the map, they fell flat. They didn't put on the pressure they needed. They couldn't match the bot side pressure. They couldn't just leave Hjarna on an island going into that match. I mean, in no world was Misfits going to let him live on an island. And Misfits showed that. And Misfits punished that playstyle of G2, punished that mid-focused playstyle out of G2, and they did great. And they picked up a good 3 wins on them. They weren't all like total stomps. In no world would I thought that Misfits stomps G2 in 3 games, or G2 stomps Misfits out of 3 games. They were close games for the most part, but Misfits in the end just put down the pressure they needed to, kept up the pacing, and just kept up the bloodthirstiness, kept up the kills, which overall led to them winning the series with a 3-0. But that's going to be it for this episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you agree with some of the points I said? Do you have additional points based on what based on what I said? Do you have additional points? Who do you think showed up huge in that? I'm going to say that my MVP for that series was definitely Hansama. He looked great. I think Hansama looked like a big guy in that match. He looked amazing. The only person that I think that probably could have deserved it besides him, besides Alfari, was pretty great. They were all great for different reasons, but another MVP was definitely Maxlor coming in second, because Maxlor put down that pressure that I thought he needed. But yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. What'd you think? Do you think this was good? Bad? Never want to see it again? I suck. Shut up. Tell me to shut up. Whatever you think, let me know down in the comment section down below. But until next time, thanks for watching. Remember, rate the video, comment the video, and subscribe so you don't miss another episode of Chase Thoughts. Until next time, this is Chase, signing off.